Welcome everyone to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's September 4th, 2024. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator for funded startups and enterprises that helps companies who are overwhelmed with AWS. And we do this by using our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So no matter where you find yourself on this journey, we're here to help your team launch your products faster. So head over to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. Answer a few quick questions and you'll book a meeting with me directly. So how can you maximize today's session? First off, our format is very informal. Engage as much as you'd like, ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. And for those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Go to cloudposse.com/officehours to subscribe. Now, I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, please share it with your team. You can find that recording on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse, and it'll be posted in a few hours. So with that said, let's get into the news and announcements for this week. All right, first one is interesting. There's been a lot of license changes happening lately. I forget the one that was most recently, just like 2 weeks ago, but now Elasticsearch has now switched back, or is rather a dual licensed project now. One of those licenses is AGPL. Obviously, AGPL is probably the least liked license by other companies. But if you're using it strictly as a server product, it doesn't contaminate your application for using it. If you are making changes to Elastic, the source code itself, you have to open source your changes to it. And that's basically AGPL. So I think this is interesting. I'd like to understand the backstory a little bit more that drove this decision. Sounds like they missed being able to call themselves open source. Any opinions on this?
I'm sure.
I mean, I'm a huge fan. I as soon as things go BSL or not fully open sourced, I usually ditch them. So congratulations to these guys.
Share the same sentiments.
I wonder though, yeah, has this ship sailed? Are the alternative for is like OpenSearch, has that progressed too far? Is this a little too late, or will this work?
OpenSearch works fine for me. So until that isn't true, I don't have an impetus to make a change right now. And it meets all my requirements. It's not broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is similar to like maybe I haven't been following the news on this particular product closely enough. Is this similar to like if Terraform, did their BSL thing, so people switched to OpenTofu, and then Terraform changed their mind and said, "Oh, never mind, we're open source again."
Kind of.
Yeah.
Where instead of going back to MPL, they'd be going back to like AGPL, hypothetically. It's similar to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, open source is critical to me. That makes or breaks. That is a deal breaker for me on software. If it's a choice for me where I can self-host or at least use open source software, I always go that route versus the alternative. So I think this is probably a smart move by them. Whether it will win customers back, I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. All right, Matt, any thoughts on this before I move on?
I was just going to say that I'm sure there's also some underlying business driver for them to do this, because they wouldn't go through all the legal expense of doing this yet again if there weren't some like specific business reason that this is a necessity for them. I mean, the original reason they changed their license was basically because Amazon was cannibalizing their hard work and commercializing the hosting offering, and they weren't able to monetize all the work that they did as a product. So something else I'm sure is now driving like the reason that they're going back to this more than pure altruism. I mean, I'm sure like they like to be open source, but the business didn't spend,
Yeah.
$500,000 in legal fees for, to go do this again or whatever it ended up costing them. So, yeah.
So, I mean, under this model, and I don't know AGPL well enough, does that preclude other companies from hosting it, provided those companies release the entirety of their modifications to the product for hosting it?
Yeah, that I'm not a licensing expert on this particular license, so I don't really know.
Yeah.
One of the things like I like just general and open source, I think it's part of the equation, but on the side is access to the technology to learn it. Before, I don't know if people were around for the Oracle days or before Oracle, where in order to get access to the technology to learn it so you could get into a job that with that technology, you would have to pay thousands of dollars. I mean, I remember some people getting F5 switches in their home that they'd buy off of eBay or whatever, just so they could learn the technology to be able to have a foothold into that market. And so when I see a lot of companies going away from open source, it strikes terror in me that we're going to make it a kind of closed, exclusionary type, market where it's going to be hard to get access to the technology and learn and get into it for the next generation. And we already have a problem with the next generation learning, coming on board, being on board it.
I mean, in all fairness, though, I think a lot of these license changes aren't targeting individuals and developers, and the licenses are source available, so you can still, crack it open and look at it. And they're not really targeting, you as a learner.
No, I know that, but see, there's an aggregate effect. For example, like when you have a platform that has, like, say, a plugin type interface where people can contribute, and their stuff is openly accessible rather than say through paywalls, even if the paywall is free and zero. What happens is if you put barriers in the way, it just kind of adds to the friction. So stuff that's like open, there's just all kinds, like Terraform, for example, there's all kinds of plugins, providers made by the community available for Terraform, and some surprisingly so. Whereas other platforms that are more closed, don't, and they try to make money in places that really undermine their platform. And I think Elasticsearch as a business is like one of those things. If you look at their training or certification and stuff, it's going to be in the thousands of dollars, and it shows that they're not making money. And this is where they think they can make money. Where something else like Prometheus and stuff is just so much more widely accessible, and their training for it, the certifications they do have is cheap. It's
Yeah,
just an aggregate effect, that Halo or whatever.
I know Cloud Posse is very free and open, but it doesn't translate to our bank account. But maybe we have other things wrong.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of it. At the end of the day, the people who like the desire for it to be open and free or low cost and all of that thing are often at odds with like the hundreds and thousands of hours it takes to build and maintain these things. And like we need to come up with some sort of, I think we've talked about this in other ways, is like, open source isn't free, right? It's people are either donating their time to do it because they have a problem to solve themselves, and then they share what they did, to solve it. But that also doesn't scale to continue to improve things and maintain them. And the bigger a product gets and the more widely adopted it becomes, the more time and effort it takes to stay on top of, um, you know, uh, contributions and, and support and marketing and feature enhancements and, whatever it is. And that doesn't come free. And then it's almost like, well, if you asked every person that used Elasticsearch to donate $5, the problem would be solved. But
Yeah.
like on the other hand, people will be like $5.
That's
I'm
outrageous.
not paying
$5.
That's
It's
ridiculous
not worth that.
for
No
Elasticsearch.
way.
Yeah, but I'm saying like it literally could be if every user gave $5 to Elasticsearch, the problem would be solved. Like they would have enough revenue for like years basically for that. There's like, tens of millions of users, kinds of things. So I don't know. It just seems it seems like we've got a problem right now with open source and how it gets funded and how people can genuinely make a living by having open products, but also like be comfortable in their lives and not have to scrape by and like do all these other things to make it happen. So it seems like both sides of this marketplace are at odds with each other, unfortunately.
I empathize with both sides.
Along those lines, real quick, I was gonna say I'm so proud of myself because I finally like sponsored my first thing in GitHub. Those of us that have a decent
Awesome.
salary and have the money to spend, give your money to open source. I spend, I don't know, probably 50, 60 bucks a month on random open source products, OpenStreetMaps and like Fedi Labs and Mastodon crap and whatever, a bunch of random junk. But yeah, find some products you like, give them $5 a month. And maybe they won't do this BS. Well, no, they'll still go closed source because they need the money. But maybe maybe they'll listen to the people who are giving them money more than they'll listen to just like random people who use their stuff.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Who knows?
The hope. Also, what I find is interesting is that obviously means tons for individuals as yourself to do that. But this stuff is being used by for-profit companies. And like, they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a month or, in payroll and things, $5 here and there, $100 here and there. It doesn't even register. It's a rounding error. I wish they would.
That's actually a great point. Maybe, has anyone here successfully convinced their company to give money to an open source product when they didn't have to? Because if so, that would be a definitely a huge windfall.
Very interested. Subscribing.
I know Eric will talk about it, but we've over the last 6 months or so have been pushing Cloud Posse subscriptions, and what we've definitely found is that the GitHub doesn't make it easy to give to subscribe and give money as an enterprise. For sure, you have to jump through all sorts of hoops to make it happen. So not not the easiest thing. You really want to have to want to give the money in order to do it. It isn't just like click a button and it's not a big deal. Like click, let me go. You have to sign agreements and do all sorts of crazy things with GitHub.
Pay in advance for like 5 months and then draw that down, and it's not working.
It's way easier where you could just put your credit card number in and go.
Yeah.
That's what most of us prefer, I think. It's just, there's no blocker.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you're on GitHub Enterprise with invoicing, they don't do that.
Yeah, they don't do that.
And that's who really needs to be giving back to open source, in my professional opinion.
Maybe file an issue with GitHub Enterprise if that part of it's open source. Say, hey, make it easier for us to be sponsors.
Yeah, so one of the nice things I discovered that GitHub does for sponsorships on this side is they help you see your supply chain, so you can see the projects your organization depends on and donate directly to those projects, but they exclude Terraform as a language, even though it's like in a top 5 language or something on GitHub, top 10 at least. So anyways, so I did email them. The reason why I brought that up is I emailed them about that, and they never got back to me. Oh well, you win some, you lose some. I did pursue.
I'm sure they'll get back someday, right?
Yeah. So the next one was brought to my attention, surprisingly, by a non-techie who works at Halliburton. I hadn't seen this, and apparently it was under the radar for a little while. Today or yesterday, I think it was on TechCrunch and elsewhere. Halliburton has experienced a significant ransomware attack, but they haven't gone into too many details yet on the nature of that, though customer information has been compromised, apparently. Anyone know more about the cyber attack? It's a ransomware type of thing.
Hope they have backups.
Yeah. Yeah. Next announcement was, I thought this was kind of cool. I think it was trending on Hacker News over the weekend or so. One of the most annoying things as a consumer of RSS for me has always been, well, you don't actually get the full content usually. And if you start subscribing to a feed, it's limited. Like to whatever the blogging software sets as that limit. And I don't think it's really to thwart bad actors so much as just their practical limits to these things. And that's what they said. Well, this is a self-hosted service that I believe will scrape the RSS feeds and also index or scrape the actual linked article so you get the full text of the RSS feed. And
What's
if you
called?
it's called this DogeSec.
Okay. Okay.
Well, we'll share a link in a little bit after office hours here.
Thank you.
But, at least that's my understanding of what it does. Maybe it is an open source. I thought it was an open source thing. And I know this is security focused, but I thought it was self-hostable. Maybe I totally bungled that. So yeah, maybe it is just a hosted RSS feeds for security related content. But anyways, I would really like something like this just in general.
No, it's in their corporate GitHub and it's public.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Apache license 2.0. Yeah.
All right, sweet.
Last commit was an hour ago. So yeah, other
Yeah.
people like it too.
The other thing I've wanted sometimes is there are different types of newsletters. There's the newsletters that have a lot of content on them, and then there are the newsletters a little bit like Cloud Posse's, which has a lot of links in it, links to other things to check out. Sometimes I wish I could just have each one of those links as a separate item in the RSS feed, rather than having to open or read the post itself. All right, next announcement is this here. It's a proposal for a new robots.txt specifically for training LLMs or specifically for LLMs training on your content. So this is just a proposal. I don't believe it's necessarily been adopted by anyone yet. And it's not clear to me that it requires a new file format and that this couldn't be solved with robots.txt as well, but
Well, don't they have like two different purposes? Like there might be content that you want indexed, but you don't want an LLM to train on.
That's
Yeah,
true.
but if you could do that all in one YAML document as opposed to two, or text document as opposed to two. Yeah.
Well, the format, I'm just saying, would have to be different, or there would have to be different keys or something at least to indicate that a rule that you're putting in there is for like spiders versus or web crawlers or whatever versus
In full
LLM.
disclosure, I haven't touched a robots.txt file in, a couple decades. So maybe it's changed since I used it last. So, okay.
I was thinking, I was going to joke. I say it's so great that people want to contribute their content to AI. Then they won't need you anymore.
Yeah. The format has grown, but I don't know that it maybe supports enough metadata to convey.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
Maybe the robots.txt should be expanded though.
Oh yeah, that's different. Like that's a different proposal. But in either case, I don't think that the robots.txt in and of itself is wide enough to solve the problem of both.
Oh,
Like
This specifically is for inferencing, not training, it says. So this is a proposal to standardize on using llms.txt file to provide information to help LLMs use a website at inference time.
Oh,
Live ingestion of live data.
oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That is different.
Okay, now I get it.
My slides did this thing again. All right.
I can't find the YouTube video right now, but I was watching one yesterday that apparently there's a way on several of the LLMs out there to ask it. You have to ask it in a certain way, but if you ask it properly, it will give you back various real API keys that it has learned as part of its training data accidentally.
You don't have to. That prompt's pretty easy.
Well,
a
a
lot
lot of them now, if you ask it like directly, it will like they've fixed the prompt so that it will say like, if you need an API key for this service, please contact them directly. I can't give you that information, but there's still ways to like
Speaking of
kind
cool
of trick them.
OpenSearch, you could use OpenSearch to do that yourself too. So, kind of cool.
I'm wondering if there's like, like how people are gamifying the searches to try to get people looking for a technical solution to download a Trojan. I wonder how long it'll be before they could gamify the AI to suggest downloading code or something that could backdoor into companies.
I bet there are even examples of that one could find right now, especially in maybe other languages that are more easily exploitable. All right. Next announcement. This was one you shared with me, Matt. I didn't have a chance to read through it. Obviously, depending on what camp you're in, this is either a sound or laughable argument. All right, have at it. EKS or ECS, more cost effective?
It depends on where your knowledge is and what you want to touch. If you don't have knowledge about maintaining hardware or versions or dependencies, or if you don't want to do any of that, then EKS is not the right product for you. But if you want all the switches, ECS is not the right product for you. So different use cases. It's easier to bootstrap something on ECS. It's more money. Like in the end, it costs more money, I think, because it's more managed. But you can start something on ECS and migrate to EKS fairly easily. Going the other way doesn't make a lot of sense unless you had a unique business.
Well, I think right there in the last line of there, it could say lack of support for stateful sets, Helm charts. Right there, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, stateful sets. I mean, a lot of the automation besides ECS, but even the autoscale groups and the equivalent of other cloud platforms, they don't really handle stateful sets well or at all.
True.
That's always been a one problem. If you don't have a horizontally scalable application that's stateless, then you're kind of screwed. I mean, Kubernetes and Nomad and others are the only games in town.
Well, in Kubernetes 129 or 130, I forget which one. Now we can vertically scale without restarting the pod. It's still beta, but we have that vertical pod autoscaler now that we can dynamically assign more or less resources to a pod while it's running. And we can't do that in ECS.
Yeah, but I mean, like for the stateful apps, like if you scaling out on a distributed app with the different components have unique states, so that 0 of your cluster comes back as 0 and 1 of your cluster comes back as 1 and reattaches the volume that had its last known persistent state automatically. I'm surprised the cloud vendors have never come out with that type of automation because there's such a need for it. And it's interesting because Kubernetes with a stateful set kind of leapfrogged them all and offered it. And they still today don't have a comparable solution, like say for the VMs
Yeah.
or
Not everything should be
AGS.
not everything should be a container though, too. So I don't know if you need to solve 100% of edge cases with one product.
No, what I'm saying is, but they don't have, there is no solution for VMs. So, well, except for something like Nomad, but there's no solution from the cloud vendors for stateful scaling. So
Isn't KubeVirt support VMs workload, or I'm missing something?
well, no,
Yeah, but it's not supported by the cloud vendors, right?
yeah. So the cloud vendor,
You're
for
on your
example,
own.
for example, just spelling out the Pacific Tech as AWS has autoscale groups. Microsoft Azure has VMSS, virtual machine scale sets, and then managed infrastructure templates or whatever the groups in Google Cloud. They don't quite support it. The autoscale groups definitely doesn't support any type of state. Now, Portworx a long time ago did come out a solution that I think wrote off a console to try to manage this volume, gets reattached to this one, but it was a completely, on top of the technology. But from the cloud vendors themselves, they never offer that solution.
One of the dudes in chat, Alex, said, "Don't be stateful." I think that's where you have to start. Is what is the solution that you're going for, and is a Kubernetes stateful set the right answer?
Well, yeah. For example, like I worked at a company called dgraph, which is a highly distributed graph database that outperforms Amazon's Neptune or whatever. And this thing's managing terabytes of data. The data sets of the graph, the predicates are replicated across multiple nodes. And so each of those nodes has a state at the point in which they're replicating. That's what there isn't. You have to use stateful sets or equivalent stateful support in whatever platform. Not everything's a web app without a state.
Traditional applications that are stateful. I mean, if you are migrating workloads that weren't built to run that way.
Yeah, there's a different products out there that are clusters that aren't the old school SQL databases, and there aren't web apps that are clones of each other that you could just horizontally scale in that way. They have state, and that's a real need.
As a software developer, I would proposition those people to rewrite their code. So,
well, the thing is, we have a
You
competitor.
can't always do that, right? Like if you're running Kafka on Kubernetes.
you can't, but you also can't work. You also can't make legacy code last forever. At some point, you have to break.
All right. Well, yeah, let's move on from that topic. Next one was this announcement from S3. S3's been getting a lot of flack lately for being pretty far behind in terms of some other object storage systems that support operations that make it more convenient to use in a optimistic concurrency kind of way. It's almost like Amazon heard that and then quickly rolled something out. Unfortunately, this seems very limited in what they added support for. But basically, the idea is that if you're building a distributed app and you're needing to write objects to S3, and it's possible that two workers, for example, write to the same object path at the same time, one could clobber the other, and you have no way of really handling the failure case. Now it supports the conditional writes, which I think, from my reading of it, it's more like conditional creates rather than conditional writes, because it's on, I believe it's only right now on put objects, and I don't know that you can do it like with a condition on time, but maybe I just skimmed this too quickly. Because the ideal thing would be able to update an object as well, optimistically, provided the object wasn't modified after XYZ date and time. This, I believe, only checks to see for the existence of the object before writing it, and errors if it does exist. Anyone take a closer look at this one? All right.
If I understand it, it's like if something's in flight, you could check to make sure that something is in flight. If it's not, then up do that conditional write. If I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, I didn't quite follow, so apologies.
So if I'm understanding correctly, let's say there's already that chunk or whatever is being streamed up, you're writing it and it's in flight. You could check to see if that's already in flight and finished before you try to write that chunk or whatever part again.
Well, that's for the multi-part portion of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
It was which I didn't address, but yeah, for the put object, the first one, it's only on creation, I think.
That does look like a feature that should have been in the before category.
Yeah. All right, next update was ABAC, attribute-based access controls for DynamoDB. So you can tag basically your documents in DynamoDB and set up IAM policies on that. This is a limited preview though, so it's not GA yet. You have to apply to start using.
And
I
it's
guess.
also a subset of regions if you look at that too.
Okay.
Subset of what?
Regions that it's available in to test.
My guess is that will be released at reInvent or something coming up in a few months. All right, next one was this is a old announcement. This is back from February that I missed. I didn't see that Amazon has a new service called the IAC generator, which will scan some account for infrastructure, come back and let you kind of select what you want to codify. And then it'll generate the CloudFormation templates for you to reproduce that environment. So what caught my attention was today, this week, there was an announcement that they enhanced that so that there's better visualization now on selecting what you want it to generate infrastructure as code for. Has anyone used the IAC generator with CloudFormation? No. Was it used to everyone else? Anyone else too? Everyone else too?
Anyone ever enjoy using CloudFormation?
Before Terraform, sure.
And JSON?
No, I only ever did it in YAML. JSON makes my eyes hurt.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons to hate CloudFormation. Obviously, we are a Terraform shop doing mostly Terraform, but it does make deployments like trivial when they work. I mean, you can just post your document to an endpoint and expect it to get created, rolled back sometimes, often failed, which is why we hate it. But hey, Terraform fails too all the time. So
yeah,
idempotent infrastructure as code.
I think just to be fair, really quickly on that is I think some of the it always fails is a legacy view. Like
Okay.
all this time that we've been using, Terraform, they've been making huge improvements to to CloudFormation. And and I think I shared this one time before. So this goes back maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I met with maybe it was 4 years ago. I met with a product manager at CloudFormation and had a discussion. And he told me that something like 70% of all of their enterprise customers use CloudFormation to deploy their AWS resources. So like what we think we're doing in Terraform is a tiny little slice compared to like what what people are actually doing in CloudFormation, all around the world. So they've continued to improve it, and it's definitely gotten a lot better versus 10 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. All right. Next one is something that caught my attention. OpenTofu voted to block Russia due to US sanctions, presumably. I've seen similar mentions like this, like DockerHub there was a post here, was not available from Russia. And there was people officially at Docker responding here, like I believe this one here, or maybe it was another one, but I haven't ever seen like the reference to the precise sanction. So I'm a little bit, confused on that. Also, I'm not 100% sure if like, for example, the Terraform registry is blocking it, but I did find, one post from 22 where someone said something to that effect, but I don't know if it's still true. And this is just, one example. And then there was some controversy around this, of course, because to some degree it feels like it's politicizing open source, and it's possibly inconsistently applied. So yeah, just thought I'd bring this up. Anyone have thoughts on it?
Well, if I remember correctly, they also deleted some providers, and that seemed to be a bigger controversy. They without discussion and without like a lot of reasoning behind it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they deleted Yandex, CyberCloud, and Roostack. Terraform providers.
But there's not much else they can do. I mean, this is a political problem, and you are forced to do it. It happens to a bunch of product manufacturers too. So you're kind of screwed. When I used to work on Sonatype, we had similar issues with certain countries, and for example, we couldn't sell our product to anyone in China, period. So, but those things have been around forever. It's not a new thing. So, I would not condemn that they have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this is like, I think you can get sanctioned for doing business with these other countries, but this isn't, they're not doing business. This is free open source software. So I find this to be kind of ridiculous, frankly.
Yeah.
This speaks to me, this is the need for more decentralization. Maybe the OpenTofu registry shouldn't be like a thing that runs in the United States. It should be like, I don't know, a collection of registries that are all federated.
But then how do BlackRock and other companies make profits? Yeah, but I was thinking the same thing too. It's just like I always thought, maybe it's not true, but I always thought the sanctions were for like doing business and Russia profiting, not free stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is just a bunch of, I mean, I think somebody with enough power and who really wanted to do something that they felt was politically the right thing to do decided to do this. I guess they is, you said it was unanimous vote by some people or other, OpenTofu people.
Yeah, there was a steering committee meeting, and this is under the OpenTofu repository, and the attendees and the decisions by meeting. So yeah.
I haven't read the document of the sanctions myself, so I can't really comment on, I can make assumptions of like what actually the tariffs mean if it's only to sell products or making businesses with other companies. I think it actually spans more than that. So it's tricky to make assumptions of what they shouldn't have done, and maybe it's treated as a product. I don't know, but it's not a document that I'm going to read, so that's why I'm not going to make comments about it.
Yeah, just to be fair, like I completely unrelated to this, I was reading an article the other day that there are like over 300 sanctions in place by the US government against Russia, and some of them definitely, like I was scanning through the document on what they were, and some of them for sure are about like technologies that do certain things and a bunch of other things. So clearly someone believes or has been told, advised legally, to, that they were doing something that was not in compliance with the sanction. So they decided that they would take action to become like compliant with the sanctions. Now we can argue whether or not open source should fall under that, or the technologies that are developed in open source, and whatever they are. But at the end of the day, if OpenTofu was advised by their legal advisors that they were doing something that was against a US sanction that's in place, and they became compliant with that, that doesn't, like, we should not hold them hold them responsible for that. They're just adhering to what they should be doing.
Do the AWS modules Terraform still require you to enable Putin as a bastard or whatever to deploy them?
I don't know, but I know
that was a required setting at one point. Otherwise, they would just not deploy.
That's hilarious. I didn't hear about this. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, anyway, I think this was people, wanted to do something, and this is the power. The power they had was the power over OpenTofu, and so they did what they can with the power they've got. I mean, personally, a lot of sanctions, especially when it comes to open source software and free things, educational things, I only begrudgingly apply I only begrudgingly comply the minimum possible when forced to. If you're in like a SOC 2 compliant company and like someone comes after you telling you you're gonna have to start, setting up your geo fencing, and so no one can get to your websites from these countries or whatever. I don't know. I push back on that as much as I can, at least on the software side, because it's just the war is not going to be stopped by someone saying, "Oh, I can't use this OpenTofu module." Like if they're going to sanction something, sanction something real. Sanction something that actually affects the people in power, not necessarily the populace. Like I don't want kids in Syria to not be able to learn OpenTofu because the U.S. decided that Syria is bad and they won't let them have anything. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I kind of share that sentiment.
Yeah, sanctioning is a useful tactic. I prefer sanctions to war for sure, but I think they should I think it's a thing that needs to be examined much more closely. And I think a lot of people over comply by default. They're like, "Oh, do we have to do that? Well, let's just do it anyway, just in case. Let's just turn on all the Cloudflare blocky everything, and make everything miserable for anyone who's on a VPN, or for anyone who's in a country that's that we think might be bad." It's easy to over comply.
So I just thought I mentioned. So I published another concept article.
All right, let's see what you got here.
People probably more familiar with this one. I bet it's more recent.
Snowflake versus Phoenix. All right, do you want to give the rundown?
Yeah, so basically, the concept is everyone knows they're lovable snowflakes, two servers drift over time for what the desired state's supposed to be. And so then they have multiple snowflakes. And then, of course, with Docker, more especially, the idea is that the servers are destroyed and then you deploy new ones from containers. But the concept below that's important because it could be applied at multiple layers. So the kind of idea is that you destroy stuff and recreate it with automation infrastructure as code from ground up as a kind of general principle. Obviously, immutable infrastructure, we do that, but there's other layers. Like, for example, people are familiar with ClickOps and the AWS Web Console. So that's not a Phoenix type pattern. I mean, so the idea is that you have automation that brings it up from nothing rather than having the old Jenkins server that they keep patching. That's the kind of idea. So whether that uses containers or it doesn't use containers, it might use, Chef, Puppet, whatever. But the idea is destroy it and recreate it from nothing. And then you have greater predictability, better quality, better reliability, and everything. And that's the main concept. So whatever that applies to, that's the concept. You'd be able to destroy a thing, you could create a thing.
With the, I mean, the other Phoenix server, would that be comparable though, no, to, like the other common expression, pets versus cattle? Snowflakes are kind of your pets and the cattle are your Phoenixes?
Yeah, except I would say there's two extreme ends because there's like, say, kind of like 4 layers. So one, you have your lovable pet server, and you don't have, like, say, fleet management of pet servers. But you can have, say, snowflakes. So snowflakes could be your lovable single pet server that vertically scales, but you could also have a set of servers that are managed where you use, like, say, Chef or Puppet to converge them back in the states that you're managing. And so that's their extra automation layer kind of going in between. And then the cattles is definitely a Phoenix pattern. You're destroying all the servers and recreating them for nothing. Well, not all the servers, just the ones that you're replacing or repairing or whatever. You're destroying them and recreating them from nothing. So the cattle and the Phoenix servers definitely is 100% match. But there's something kind of like an automation layer in between where you're converging several servers as part of fleet management. That would be Snowflake servers. Versus the extreme end of it is just your single pet server that may or may not use automation.
I was just reading here. All right, well, I think, yeah, I'm gonna have to take a closer look at that and digest that. Thanks for sharing, Joaquin.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into the Q&A. Any questions we can get answered today? This is an open-ended portion of our call. If you're grappling with any challenges, architectural, technical, or just like career-wise, we're here to chime in. Yeah, I do believe we had talked about someone shared passing on crossplane by Masterpoint. Had seen, I think we talked about that one previously.
I'm trying. Hello. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, fire away.
Okay. So I'm trying to create virtual clusters nowadays. It's like multi-tenancy Kubernetes cluster. I'm using vCluster, but I'm using vCluster and Cluster API, but I found like Cluster API is not fully integrated with vCluster. I'm asking if anyone have experienced that or played with vCluster or Cluster API before.
Not I.
Yeah, what is vCluster? I haven't heard of that.
vCluster is a virtual cluster, as it seems. So it will create like a virtual cluster inside your Kubernetes cluster. The separation will be like it's a namespace separation wise, but it's more. Yeah, there is capsule. There is capsule, I think, if you know it from Classics.
Nope, I don't know that one very well either.
So I mean, what are your approaches for creating a multi-tenancy cluster?
I usually don't. Clusters are not. I usually create a cluster per. In a small company, it's like a cluster per deployment environment for me. So I have like a dev cluster, test, prod, so 3 clusters maybe. In a larger company, I do like a cluster per kind of major project per deployment environment. So you would have like project A, dev, project A test, project B dev, project B test. Doing multi-tenancy would save you the $70 a month for the masters or whatever, but you also end up spinning up more of the same kind of like well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Who
I
does
think
multi-tenancy well?
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
you might be talking about 2 different types of multi-tenancy here, right? Like if you're actually
Yeah.
talking about like multi-tenancy for like each of your customers gets their own namespace or own virtual cluster, so that like one customer's workloads don't interfere with another customer's workloads of like your SaaS application. That's really hard to deploy a full cluster for each. And we've dealt with a couple of customers who have done that, but mostly we've done it with namespaces, and then we've used Carpenter to scale the workloads appropriately for each of those like namespaces and tags and all of those kinds of
I'm-
things.
I mean, like isolating the workload with namespace isn't hard. I mean, are there any potential of I mean, someone from a namespace can access another namespace?
I mean, you would have to essentially, you'd have to like break the the Kubernetes barrier that they put in place for that. Like you'd have to find some hack or some exploitation for that to happen. And I think
Yeah.
it also depends on what you are, like what level of access do the people in each of those tenants have. Like, are you giving them direct node access to the underlying hardware nodes? Can they just run pods on that? Can they just run a service that's running in a namespace? And I think the higher up the stack that you go, the likelihood of being able to cross that boundary gets exponentially harder. If you look at it that way. So I think, unfortunately, I think there isn't a one size fits all solution to this problem.
Okay, got it, yeah. So I mean, like vCluster will maybe give you the isolation that you need. It's not like it's more than a namespace. I think you can see it from the documentation. But yeah, I don't know. It's quite hard sometimes. One benefit that I saw that you can span a key 3s cluster inside a key. I mean, like a native Kubernetes cluster or a key 0s inside a native Kubernetes
Presumably,
Yeah, I
cluster.
would
I
still
don't
say this seems. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just, yeah, I mean, I think K3S is solving a different problem, not necessarily helping you from a security model, but from a test and iteration or a lightweight model. It's just a simpler Kubernetes.
Yeah, I just understood. Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah,
this
I was gonna
might
say
make
from a.
sense. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, from a security model, you want as much separation as possible. So separate cluster per customer. If that's too expensive because you have hundreds of customers and their deployments are each like just a few, small things, it's not worth paying for separate clusters for each of them. Then the namespace, you have to trust the namespace security model. On that point, I wouldn't focus on virtual clusters inside your cluster. I would focus on really strong like network policies and what's the thing? OPA, what's the new one? Kyverno or something. A lot of like
Kyverno, I
really
think.
good policies to keep everything separated.
Yeah, they mentioned also Kyverno on their blogs. Yeah.
Yeah, Kyverno is pretty cool. I haven't used it in production, but I've done some labs with it before, and it seems really cool.
Yeah, thanks. On for managing multi clusters, what the get-go is Rancher or Cluster API or what?
I tried Cluster API, and I don't think it's quite there yet. It's really complicated. I'm still just doing Terraform or OpenTofu.
No, okay, thanks.
I think that, yeah, as others have alluded to, there's kind of like, if you go by your requirements strictly on some technical features, you might end up at solutions like Redshift and Rancher and vCluster and things like that. But I think you also have to think about what is the long-term commitment there and obligation of the team to learn and master it. And while this is probably one of the best solutions maybe right now based on what's available, but do you need to solve this problem right now? And should you use that solution, or should you go with just something that's turnkey, fully managed? You have AWS support, they can help you out. It's 10 to 1 the number of people who understand EKS versus vCluster or some other solution like that. So while some of these things might, check the boxes of some requirements, I would question the requirements themselves and see if you can't get away with what you get with vanilla Kubernetes to keep things simpler and within the realm of, what most people understand.
Yeah, understood. But yeah, my core goal, it was like a fun project. It's me and my friend. It's just like we're creating it's just a fun project. Yeah, you're just playing with
No judgment here. And those are great, fun. That's how we all learn. And by going deep on those things, you're gonna master a lot of underlying technologies. My experience has just been jaded by our experience consulting with a lot of companies and seeing how hard it is for teams that are thrown into this to pick it up. It's kind of like, deploying Prometheus and Grafana inside the cluster, easy. You get that done in 5 minutes with the Helm charts or whatnot. There, you did it. And then, okay, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months down the road, time to upgrade it, or you max it out, and it's the pods are crash looping, and you can't figure out what's wrong with your cluster because everything is in that state. Then suddenly it's like, oh God, I just wish I had not done that and deployed something somewhere else so I could actually understand now what's going on. My point is, the more you deploy inside the cluster, the harder it is for the teams to manage, unless you have teams dedicated to owning and managing that one thing. And the smaller the team, the more you stick in there, they're going to struggle so much with that. So right now we deploy Carpenter and Actions Runner controller. And we've been doing this for a few years now. 2 at least, maybe, I forget, maybe Actions Runner controller a little bit less, but it's been a long time. And we, on a weekly, if not monthly basis, somebody is struggling with some combination of those two. And it's gotten so complicated under the hood to optimize and tune these things. And most people just want their apps deployed on the cluster. They don't want to have to deal with this minutia. So that's why I'm just cautioning people about trying to do too many fancy things that don't come out of the box with Kubernetes, because you're not going to manage it. Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly add that every one of these things is a layer of indirection or a layer of abstraction on top of what's actually happening. So, Kubernetes is one, and, the virtual cloud is one, and VPCs are one, and, Amazon itself is one. And, as you keep going, like, up and up and up the stack, and you have more and more abstractions, the ability to reason about what's happening and troubleshoot when something goes wrong goes up exponentially. So I would really always caution about like having a very, very, very good reason for slapping another layer of indirection or another layer of abstraction on top of of anything that you're doing, because it makes it so much harder when inevitably something goes wrong.
I I want to chime in as well in terms of my own experience. I worked at a startup that I was spending every day in Kubernetes, and then I moved to my current role where it's a much larger company, but they made the technical decision to go with ECS as well. And so I missed a lot of things in Kubernetes. And part of me also kind of, I think, misses the firefighting and all the time I spent just like fixing Kubernetes issues. But like realistically, I think it's a much better, stable like environment we have without Kubernetes. And so like I want to go back to playing with Kubernetes. I've been thinking about setting up locally and like just keeping up with everything that's going on in that ecosystem. But I think I have a more nuanced view in terms of Kubernetes has a lot of benefits, and there's things that you want to do on ECS that are very difficult, and it requires so much Terraform to like combine everything to get to where you want. But you really do need to have a team that knows what they're doing and be willing to accept the fact that this will be a major time sink in terms of keeping up with everything, updating things, and all of that. And so I'm kind of like confused because I love Kubernetes as a technology and it's very exciting and I love that I learn new things. But with ECS, I just set and forget and I don't have to do anything. And it's a weird place to be as an engineer who likes to tinker. But as a business person, what's better for the business? That's a different question.
Yeah, agreed. And I'll also leave this as a somewhat controversial thing and say that like as much as we do everything like infrastructure as code, I'm not sure that it's not that I'm not sure. I know in my heart that Terraform is not the right way to be managing all the deployment related things on top of ECS. And there are definitely some much better tools out there to do it. So that would be the thing that I would say. So get your cluster stable with Terraform, and then use a different tool to actually do your deployments. It's still an IAC tool, but an IAC tool that's focused specifically on ECS, like
Are you holding out on me
Espresso.
though? Like, have you found some new like thing that has you all excited, or because like
No, I mean,
I'm actually looking for that tool. I'm hoping
but
AWS Copilot is the one, but I don't know.
yeah, I mean that's like so far the one that is the least friction and makes the most sense to me is AWS Copilot. But Espresso isn't terrible either. Like I think both of those are leaps and bounds better than trying to do that native Terraform.
Yeah.
So, but I would look at both of those if if you were doing a ton of ECS work.
Yeah. Isaac, did you switch roles recently? I remember you joining, talking about introducing services.
Yeah, I did. I switched roles recently, so it's been a fun learning experience for sure. Definitely do not recommend as well deploying things to ECS with Terraform. There's pain that way, but like I was saying, there's so many things that Kubernetes makes easy for you and you take for granted. That when you have to use something different, you're like, okay, this is interesting. But I've seen a lot of articles recently about people that use Kubernetes, and I feel like a lot of people dislike Kubernetes without actually giving it a try. But you only know those things after you've used it. And if you really keep yourself to a strict subset of things that you use in Kubernetes, you can have a really smooth path. It's when you start getting fancy that your life gets difficult. Also, the fact
Yeah.
that it's not really fully managed. So there's
And,
always the updates and other things.
and I think I would say that there are just as many people who use Kubernetes who have no good reason to use Kubernetes just because they think it's cool. And I think that's
100%. I agree. I've
just
been
as
there.
bad.
I mean, I think we go back to the political side of things, right? If you use AWS products only, you're training yourself to be a customer and you're dependent on a single corporation and you're supporting a monopoly. If you use Kubernetes, you're learning open source software, which is useful anywhere. And yeah, of course, like all the Kubernetes clusters I deploy, they're on AWS because Azure sucks. And I haven't really messed with Google Cloud much, and DigitalOcean seems pretty okay. But
Well, why don't you just have a room full of servers then?
well, I do. I got one right here, and I got another one over there, and I run it at home. Like
Right.
that's the thing.
Yeah,
Like I can't run ECS at home. I can't run ECS on DigitalOcean. I can't run ECS. On
But yeah.
whether I would like for a business, no, I would not run Kubernetes on bare metal for a business by myself because that's like a lot of work. I would
Yeah.
just use EKS.
Oh, so you're teaching
But-
yourself to be a customer of one thing, but not of others.
It's not about, well, I'm not a customer of Kubernetes because Kubernetes is not a
No,
product
you're
I
a customer of a
Kubernetes-
cloud hardware. I'm giving you a
Oh
hard time.
yeah. If I could find a way to not be dependent on AWS, I would, but it's very hard. Like that's bare metal is a pain in the ass. But I aspire to be, I aspire to get there. But yeah, ECS, it's like this constant struggle. This is why like Cloud Posse I think is a great group for this. You're trying to kind of provide this like opinionated stack of stuff, right? I'm trying to do the same thing. It's frustrating to have to go back and forth all the time. Like, oh, it's ECS. Well, crap. Okay, I'm going to convert that into EKS because ECS is garbage. And then somebody else comes in later after I leave, and they're like, oh, this Kubernetes is too complicated. Let's just move to ECS. And you just go back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
It's like this eternal struggle.
I think that I know we're over time and I don't want to prolong this, but the one thing I'll say is that where I've seen most businesses fail, especially in the consulting at the management level, when I've done that in the past, has been far too often the technologists in the company focus on the things that they think are cool or they want to work on or they want to take on rather than what the unique the unique business is of that company, and you end up spending far too much time with a solution that is only marginally better when objectively looked at, and it costs significantly more or multiples more in time and effort and mental overhead and not getting other things done to get it running. And I think that that's one of those things where like Kubernetes is way more complicated than ECS, in my opinion, if all you need to do is just run some workloads of Docker containers somewhere. And we need to look at that. So maybe this is a good topic for another call at some point. We can have a chat about that.
I see that a lot. I was at a company that the solution required Kubernetes, but at the same time they had people that were Kubernetes-itis or whatever. They would take like that one small web service and only that one web service and want to put entire Kubernetes cluster under it. And I'm like, just use ASG. That's all you need is ASG. So they'd want to do it too much where it was unnecessary. And then you'd have the other argument where they wouldn't want to do it where it was necessary. So, I dealt in the middle with both extremes.
All right, everyone. We are at time today. I ran a little bit over. Want to be mindful of everyone's schedule. So thanks for your time, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. If you want to see if Cloud Posse can help you at your business with how you approach Terraform, go to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. And our weekly office hours, you can register to join these live. Go to cloudposse.com/office hours to do so. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. And subscribe to our newsletter if you want all these interesting news and announcements. We send those out once a week. That's a collection of all those links. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.